What's inside of an acorn? It's a mystery. Spoilers for up to Chapter 4 of Deltarune. Kris behaves like a dog a lot. What's up with that? They howl a bunch, scratch at doors, beg for treats, sleep like a puppy. There's a rare chance for them to have a dog stat. They wear a dog onesie, and they start howling when Susie talks about putting doggy ears on them. Does this mean anything? Well, look at Susie. She likes giant monster movies, loves acting like one, and even already came up with the name Susie Zilla. And giant monsters totally fit with her personality. She's a misunderstood rebel who loves wrecking stuff. So what could Kris's affinity with dogs tell us about them? The idea of dogs brings to mind three things to me. 1. Simplistic joy. 2. Subservience/loyalty. And 3. Opposition to cats. We know Kris has a fondness for simplistic joy. They love mossy and sweet treats, and pranking, though that one isn't particularly dog-like besides the connection to simple fun. But what about subservience/loyalty? Well, I would actually say that Kris is torn between the two. Torn between the loyalty they have for their friends and the subservience they've promised to Carol and/or the knight. We don't know the specifics, but we know that Kris has promised to work for them towards some end. The devilishly difficult knight fight is actually the best example for this. Kris's damage is drastically reduced in this fight, but if Susie or Rouse go down, their damage gets a massive boost. It's a great way to showcase their conflicting loyalties through the gameplay. Kris feels beholden to their promise, so they deal less damage against the knight, but they still care about their friends, so when Susie and Rouse get hurt, Kris doesn't hold back as much. Look at the ending scene of Chapter 4. Kris is going to leave through the window to see Susie, but the phone call reminds them of the promise, and there's a split screen effect, which I think is supposed to convey how split Kris is between the two. Why would Kris be conflicted between their promise and their friends? What keeps them bound to it? I think that Kris does it out of a feeling of guilt. I'll elaborate more on this later. But what about cats? Is there any connection between Kris and cats? I think so, but there's so much to it that we'll have to start with the roots. What are roots? Roots are the base of a tree, where it all began. What does roots mean in Deltarune? I think it's the origin of Kris's trauma. There's a lot of reasons why, but we'll start with the biggest, the Chapter 4 secret egg room. Inside is the hospital, with one of the 7 flying aces serving as secretary. But you travel to the therapy room, a door in between, one we don't see in the light world. Inside, another one of the therapies says, "Right, this is where we draw pictures and don't kill each other," which could imply Kris having a violent side. Just like every other secret egg room, there's a man behind a tree, but we can't even see the tree in this one. He points Kris towards a canvas, and it says they start to sketch what they had seen behind the tree. But no matter how hard they try, they're unable to, eventually only leaving a monochromatic smear over which they paint a tree. The tree represents Kris's suppression of a traumatic incident in their past, so roots are sort of like the origin point. When they're done drawing, they go to the sink and wash their hands. After it reads, "Between your fingers, a faint gray crease glittered stubbornly. You can never wash it all away." It's talking about how Kris feels guilty for whatever it was that happened and how they can't forgive themselves. Let's look at the room that leads to the egg room. Inside is a prophecy panel that just reads, "Roots," with a picture of a house between 2 trees, representing the Holiday Manor. In case you think otherwise, we have to get this out of the way. The prophecy panels are not meant to be literal. The best example of this is Tenna's, which reads, "Lord of Screens cleaved red by blade." It has a picture of a screen bisected. We know that this was not how he was cut. I believe this incongruence is intentional and supposed to convey that the panels are not meant to be taken literally, they're evocative. So the picture is the holiday home, connecting the holidays to Kris's trauma. The next important thing in this room is an organic who gives us a jumbled up message and says it was mixed up. When unscrambled, it reads, "Lost where the forest would grow, the children followed the pointed tail." Where the forest would grow refers to the place where Kris saw whatever it is they're repressing. The forest is the tree that covers it up. The children that followed the pointed tail. We know that Kris was one of the children, but it's not clearly stated who and how many other children followed it. But I'm pretty sure it was only Kris and Des. I'll explain why later. There's this prophecy panel that connects to the pointed tail. It reads, "They'll see the tail of hell take crawl." And the image is a tail consisting of a bunch of circles, although in the game files there's an unused version that's mostly the same, except it has a pointed tip, leading me to believe that the tail of hell and the pointed tail are the same thing. The tail being made up of a bunch of circles is very evocative of Cat Pedders 2. It's a game that's been mentioned several times, mostly by Noelle in her blog post for the Spamton sweepstakes. She talks about how the cats in the game are all made up of circles. I'm gonna stop beating around the bush. I think that friend, the spooky thing that hasn't really done much so far, is the tail of hell. Its design references Andogeny from Undertale, but it's a cat and not a dog. It's linked to the idea of roots through the song that plays in the first place you can find it, being titled Digital Roots. Plus there's the 8-bit rendition titled Bit Roots that plays in the Mantle game, which is very connected to Friend. And also, its face shows up in Batat, which is a minigame from Cat Pedders. Now I know it hasn't been shown with the tail yet, but either it could have one we cannot see, like how Endogenes is only visible from its overworld sprite, or that Friend itself is the tail, and it's not literal, like how the first hero isn't literally a cage, but a metaphorical cage. The idea I've been moving towards is that Kris does have an antagonistic relationship to a cat. Kris followed the pointed tail, Friend, who is a cat. If there are two things that dogs are known to chase, it's cats and tails after all. That's most of what I have to say on the dog-Kris subject, but I'll add that it could also tie into Kris's human dysphoria, like how they used to wear the horned headband. Pretending to be a dog may be an escape from their human side that they're uncomfortable with. I'm sure you could read into all of it deeper, but my analytical skills aren't that good, so we'll stop with it there. While we can't see behind the tree, we're going to continue by observing what we can see surrounding it. There are a bunch of hometown interactions where people allude to Kris having a bad experience with the shelter, so I think where the forest would grow was inside the shelter. And to explain why I think it was just Kris and Des, here's this line from Noelle in Chapter 2. "Don't you miss exploring, Kris? Back when the four of us were kids? Gosh, remember that night we explored the forest behind the graveyard? Ha, I know we never found anything interesting back there. I mostly remember crying because I was scared. But for some reason, I feel nostalgic thinking about it. Des wiping away my tears with Azzy's jacket. I guess I didn't mind being scared if it meant someone would comfort me." Note how she says behind the graveyard, which would be to the north of it. I've seen a lot of people interpret this as being in the same area as the shelter, but the shelter is to the south of the graveyard, not the north. I don't think she'd tell this story so casually if she was with Kris and Des while exploring the shelter, but I'll admit the possibility that it was the four of them, and she's just repressing the memory. As for Azriel, we know that he was an absolute goody two-shoes. Despite their religion not having sins, he'd go to Father Alvin and confess for Kris after they would drop Yoshi in the pit in Mario. I just don't think he would go along with it. We know that Des had one of the codes to the shelter in her guitar, because Carol wouldn't dare use that as a hiding place due to her need to keep everything the same. I think Kris probably stole the other two, due to being Asgore's kid, and they probably spent a lot of time at the church since Toriel and Azriel were members of the choir. It's hard to say whose idea it was, but I think it being Kris's would add more reason for them to feel guilty about it. Although I could also see Des abusing her position as a cooler older kid to get Kris to go along with it. As for why they did it, I think it was just for the simple fun of exploring, like what Noelle talked about, which was only made sweeter by the shelter being off limits, as we know Des was a rebel and Kris loves mischief. During the making of this video, I found this post on Twitter from @wandydoodles talking about a connection between Deltarune and Breath of Fire 2, a game that Toby referenced a ton during the anniversary stream. Now, I haven't played very much of this game, so my perspective is limited, but here's the pertinent part of their post. It's likely that the Tale of Hell was inspired by Baruberry's tale in Breath of Fire 2. The protagonist and their friend at the start as children enter a cave to find shelter from the rain and follow a tale made of connected circles, which eventually turns out to be the tale of a demon. But it's not limited to the tale itself. Baruberry is a demon who is serving the demon god Deathavan, who would be Gaster in this case, the 666 man. Baruberry lets the protagonist live on purpose because he is the destined child, necessary for Deathavan's plan. Huge thanks to @wandydoodles again, because I never would have found this connection. I don't think it's one-to-one with what happened in Deltarune, but I do think it is similar enough to mention. Whatever happened in the shelter, it seemed like it caused Des to end up as the knight. In the same room as the Roots Prophecy and the Pointed Tail Organic, there's a book that reads, "And so wept the fallen star, making rivers with its tears, then slowly from the bitter water something grew. It looked like glass." Des is the fallen star, and from her tears grew the night, which is enveloped by the glass-like black shard material. So Kris and Des got the codes for the shelter, they get lost exploring it, and then Friend shows up to lead them deeper, because the prophecy needs a knight. Kris and Des chase the cat, and then the bad thing happens. Kris is probably separated from Des, or maybe abandoned her, and gets rescued by Asgore, who's unfairly blamed for only finding Kris and not finding Death, explaining why he's been ostracized and why he's been fervent about proving his innocence. Kris feels guilty about this whole chain of events, which is how they get used by Carol and /Or the Knight, and why they're conflicted between their loyalty to their friends and their subservience to the promise they made. I don't think this interpretation is particularly groundbreaking, but I haven't really seen a good video about it, so I wanted to make one myself, along with addressing the dog in the room, since I also have not seen much discussion on what Kris's dog motif could mean. I have more thoughts specifically about the connection to Gaster and Friend and the cosmology of Deltarune. I want to make a video about it, but in case I never get around to it, the outline is that Gaster needs a knight because he needs an avatar in the world the same way we do. We, the angel, use the soul as our hands to control Kris, our avatar, and Gaster uses Friend, his demon heart, to control the knight as his avatar. If you look at darkness as representing indeterminate fiction and light representing reality, we exist in a world of pure determined light, heaven, and Gaster lives in a world of pure indeterminate fiction, hell. It seems like Gaster created this world. The first ever mention of the prophecy was in Wingdings on Deltarune.com. We're the player and he's the metaphorical game dev, our opposite. The reason I'm unsure if I'll make one is that I don't really have a grand picture or story to tell for what all of this would mean, so we'll see. But I'm not sure how it all connects to the Forgotten Man, who I kinda neglected in this video, just cause what we know doesn't add up. Cause he's simultaneously behind the tree, which means he should be behind the traumatic incident, but also just shows up in the light world and wants to help Kris / maybe even was their therapist. I guess following the evidence we have, he has to be just some part of Gaster or a similarly shattered individual, since he knows what Deltarune is and transcends the rules of the world. But all of that was just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.